could Tyrannosaurids survive on Skull Island? We'll start with Albertosaurine and Tyrannosaurine. So let's get started, shall we? Albertosaurus. For its lived in habitat, they will lived in peat swamps, lagoons, estuaries, and tidal flats, as well as deltas and floodplains. And for their diet and prey, they would feed on hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, ankylosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, troodontids, dromaeosaurids, and etc. Alioramus. For its environment, they lived in large floodplains and a humid climate. And for their diet, while Alioramus lacks many of robust and brute skull traits, such as a deep maxilla, robust lower jaws, or peg-like teeth, that are necessary to employ a puncture pull. Feeding characteristics of large Tyrannosaurids. It has been suggested that Alioramus may have exploited a different feeding style, such as focusing small-sized prey. This would also suggest that both Alioramus and Tarbosaurus, whose remains have been found, used different feeding strategies, avoiding competition. Due to their slim and gracile build, Alioramine genera may have been hunters of small, particularly fast, nimble prey, which would have allowed Alioramines to avoid competition with other larger tyrannosaurs that specialized in killing larger animals. The long and delicate snouts of Alioramines, like Alioramus and Quenchosaurus, may have also prevented them from killing the same prey species that juvenile and adult Tyrannosaurids of Tyrannosaurids like Tarbosaurus hunted. Though these larger Tyrannosaurs themselves may have hunted Alioramines as prey on occasion. Alioramines may also have had a different feeding strategy than other Tyrannosaurids, as their jaws seem to have been weaker than those of a larger genera. And even juveniles of larger species have proportionally higher bite forces than Alioramines of equivalent size. Furthermore, Alioramines seemingly remained confined to Asia, suggesting some factor prevented them from colonizing the better sample from North America. Why this may be remains a mystery until more evidence is discovered. Daspletosaurs. For their environment, they will live in vast floodplains. And for their prey, they preyed upon hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, pachycephalosaurs, ankylosaurs, troodontids, oviraptorosaurs, dromaeosaurids, and more. Even one of their own. Fossils show they have bite marks from other of its own species. The Daspletosaurs have a tendency of cannibalism. Gorgosaurus, for its environment, they would live in vast floodplains along the coast, subtropical with marked seasonally and periodic droughts. And for its diet, the juvenile Gorgosaurs may have preyed on Cetipras and Oviraptorid. Juvenile was about a year old intact, and the assumption that Tyrannosaurids fed upon prey of their size once they reach 16 to 32 kilograms, indicating that juvenile Tyrannosaurids still consumed much smaller prey after exceeding a certain size. They mainly eat the legs of centipeds, but the rest of the body, they just leave it alone. And for the others, once fully grown adults, they would hunt ceratopsids, hadrosaurs, nodosaurs, and ankylosaurs, even small theropods, troodontids, dromaeosaurids, and more. Lithonax, for their habitat environment, they would live in near lakes, floodplains, and rivers in a wet and seasonal climate. And for their prey, hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and some ankylosaurs, pachycephalosaurs. Lithonax differs from most other Tyrannosaurids due to its shortened skull with a broadened rear as well as its forward-directing orbits. No other Tyrannosaurids had such forward-directed orbits except for T-Rex and Tarbosaurus. Chianchosaurus, for their environment, floodplains, relatively warm, humid, subtropical climate. And for their prey, same as Aliramus, due to their slim and gracile build, may have been hunters of small, particularly fast and maneuverable prey, which would have allowed these Tyrannosaurids to avoid competition with other large, robust relatives that specialized in killing larger animals. Aliramians, like Aliramus and Quinchosaurus, may have prevented them from killing the same prey that juvenile and adult Tyrannosaurids, like Tarbosaurus, hunted. But they themselves ended up being preyed on occasion. Tarbosaurus, for its environment, lived in humid environments with periodic droughts and large rivers and floodplains, many shallow lakes and mud flats. And for their prey, they would prey on large hadrosaurids, sauropods, and even Alioramus, troodontids, oviraptorosaurs, therizinosaurs, ornithomimosaurs. Unlike T-Rex, which had forward-facing eyes that provided accurate binocular vision, but Tarbosaurus had a narrower skull, more typical of other Tyrannosaurids, in which the eyes faced primarily sideways. All of this suggests that Tarbosaurus relied more on its sense of smell and hearing rather than eyesight. It has been suggested that the lack of binocular vision in Asian tyrannosaurs, like Tarbosaurus itself, might have been correlated with greater amount of scavenger resources provided by sauropod carcasses, which might have afforded them a less active predatory lifestyle when compared to North American forms, meaning they would need less predatory adaptations. And for its skull mechanics, and it has differences between Tarbosaurus and North American Tyrannosaurids. Many of these differences are related to handling stress by the skull bone during bite. When the upper jaw bite down on the object, force was transmitted through the maxilla, the primarily tooth-bearing bone of the upper jaw, into surrounding skull bones. In North American Tyrannosaurids, this force went from the maxilla into the fused nasal bones on top of the snout, which were firmly connected in the rear to the lacrimal bone by bony storts. These storts locked the two bones together, suggesting that the force was then transmitted to the nasal, to the lacrimal. But Tarbosaurus lacked these bony storts, and the connection between the nasal and the lacrimals was weak. Instead, a backwards projection of the maxilla was massively developed in Tarbosaurus and fit inside the sheath formed from the lacrimal. This projection was a thin, bony plate in North American Tyrannosaurids. And its upper jaw was much more rigid. Another major differences between Tarbosaurus and its North American relatives was its more rigid mandible, while many theropods, including North American Tyrannosaurids, had some degree of flexibility between the bones and the rear of the mandible and the dentary in front. Tyrannosaurs had a locking mechanism formed from the ridge on the surface of the angular, which articulated with a square precise on the rear of the dentary. As for its bite force, its bite force had around 8,000 to 10,000 pounds per square inch of force, meaning it could crush bones just like its North American relative. Teratophonius. For their habitat, they will live in floodplains dominated by large channels and an abundance of wetland, peat swamps, ponds, and lakes. And for their diet and prey, dromaeosaurids, troodontids, ankylosaurs, hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, oviraptorsaurines. Zoochang tyrannus. For their environment, they lived in floodplains. And for their prey, they would prey on ceratopsians, hadrosaurs, and ankylosaurs, and sauropods. And that's it for this video. But don't worry, I'm gonna be doing the Could T-Rex survive on Skull Island video, because there's a whole lot of different studies on the T-Rex for many years. How would it survive, compete, advantages and disadvantages. So, like and subscribe, and see you later, guys.